So about 9 years ago, I quit my job as a welder, and I'd been doing it for about 12 years, and it was a grind, it was hot, I was welding bull bars, it was heavy, it was tough work. And and about 9 years ago, I quit that job, and I want to sort of just tell you sort of the way in which I did it, and probably what I would have changed, how I prepared for it, and probably what I would change there as well. So I was, like I said, a welder, and at the 10-year mark, I got long service leave, and then I went overseas for about 7 weeks to Southeast Asia and did a whole heap of traveling and partying and sort of all that, and it was heaps of fun, gave me a real taste of, traveling and adventure, which I've always been into. And I came back, and then I went back to work just as usual, and then I worked for another year and a half saving money up, and I quit. Now, this is actually the first time I quit, so I kind of forgotten about this, but I quit one time, so I quit that job, and that was when I'd been saving money up, and that was when I decided I want to go travel for as long as I can, and I really wanted to do 6 months, and that is what I did. I did a 6 months backpacking trip, all through Southeast Asia, all these different countries, and then I went to Africa and did some cool stuff there. A lot of bucket list type stuff. I was ticking things off my bucket list, climbing cool mountains and stuff like that. That's what I'm really into. And the whole time I was trying to do a blog and all that kind of thing, and making no money, and sort of thinking, I'm gonna make it, and I'm not gonna have to go back to welding. At the 6 month mark, I had to go back to Australia, and within a week or so, I was back at my welding job, under the same company, but at a different place, actually. And I'd kind of forgotten all about that anyway. And so that's sort of how that went down. But it was about a year and a half after that job at the new place of welding, and I was being a manager there as well, that I was actually able to quit. And what happened during that time is I started publishing books on Amazon. I discovered this sort of business model. I don't do it now, but I was doing it at the time. That was how I made money and how I was able to actually get out of my job. So to start off with the actual way in which I quit, as in, you give your notice. So here in Australia, it was, at the time I gave 2 weeks, I think it was 2 weeks notice. And I was pretty immature about it. I actually just told my foreman, I just told him, I said, hey, I'm leaving in 2 weeks, here's my notice. And it was just verbal. And he said, give it to me in writing, blah, blah, blah. So I literally went back to, my work area and wrote on a piece of paper, I, Adrian, blah, 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 resign, blah, blah, blah. And it's this dirty, scribbled piece of paper, and then I gave that to him, and it was pretty unprofessional. For the kind of job it was, I guess it wasn't too bad, but it was unprofessional. And I always say, don't burn your bridges. I think that's smart. That's probably my number one tip: is don't burn your bridges. That's obviously how I was able to go back to that job in the first place. Because I was a good worker, and I was good at it. I wasn't just good and reliable. I was good at what I did. So I'd say, don't burn your bridges. So that'd be just in terms of leaving the job. But secondly, preparing, I had built an income and I'd saved up money. So this was okay, but again, I just don't know if it was enough, because one or 2 or 3 years down the track, I was still struggling to sort of stay, making enough money to survive. And it was quite stressful, right? So I had saved up $22,000. So I had 22 grand in the bank. I always remember that number. And then I was obviously making money from my online business, like publishing books on Amazon. Now, that required reinvestment as well. So I was making, kind of just what I made at my job, about the same amount. But I had to reinvest money. And I sort of didn't really allow for that, but I was making money. And that's probably another mistake, is I sort of just made enough, just to cover what I was doing. So basically just the same as my job. but I sort of hadn't factored in that reinvestment. And I guess I sort of just didn't want to keep reinvesting, and that's obviously a big mistake with business. And yeah, and that's kind of like the big thing there that I would change. So if I was you and you're looking at changing your job, one, have your safety cushion. I know everyone says it, but it's so true, and you feel so much more secure and confident. If you choose a lower risk business model that doesn't need so much capital, you can put and yeah, it doesn't have like huge overheads. You can put so much more of your effort into it and confidence, and take bigger steps, bigger leaps, bigger risks, even if it's lower risk. You can take more risks to do that. So I would say, yeah, have that safety buffer. And again, that number sort of depends on you and your expenses. I actually still had reasonably high expenses when I left, which wasn't ideal. So I would obviously try and get your expenses down, safety cushion in place of cash, money available, and obviously an income. And this is going to depend massively, like I said, on your outgoings and your cash coming in. So some of you might need a lot, or maybe you need to sort of go back to part-time and sort of do a slow transition. But look, what I'll say is, it was a very scary move, but I wouldn't have it any other way. Like, I love being an entrepreneur. It's still it's risky, it's still stressful, and there's a lot of negatives. You're working on it all the time. It sort of never leaves you when you're thinking about other things to a degree. But absolutely, I just can't fathom the idea of going back to welding. And if I had to, I don't know what I would do. I just would not be a happy person. So yeah, if you're in the same situation, they're the steps I would take, just to try and do it safely, because you really need to save all your mental space up here. This is the biggest thing. You need money up here, if that makes sense. You need that stress-less mindset to be able to continue with your business, or continue with whatever it is you're trying to make money with, and actually sort of quit safely. So that's my tips. If you want to follow along the rest of my journey as I share my stories and share my life growing as an entrepreneur, growing in personal development, then hit subscribe.